We are delighted to have author David Instone-Brewer with us today. Welcome to the show, David.
Great to be with you.
Before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I sit in a very small office all day, and I'm a Bible geek. I'm paid to study the Bible, and at the moment I'm looking at every place where pronouns occur in the New Testament and linking them up with the correct grammatical portion of the sentence. And I do ridiculously detailed work like that in order to understand what the text says.
Awesome, that sounds so good. So how long will you be doing that project for, David?
Oh, that'll be over by the end of the week.
Oh, okay, sure. So you've got a new book out, Moral Questions of the Bible. Give us an overview of the book and also how you come to write it.
Well, every month I have this column in Christianity magazine where I have to come up with something interesting and novel and new without being heretical, which is really difficult. But often I'm puzzling over things in the Bible like, how is it in the Old Testament we're told to do one thing and in the New Testament we're told to do something else? And now the world has changed. What on earth do we do? How do we take the Bible as a guidance for life? So that's what hit me on a lot of the chapters here in this Moral Questions of the Bible.
So what were your methods or tests when coming up with a conclusion as to whether or not the law or the command issued in the Bible was still applicable today?
Well, it's two tests, really. So first of all, look to see if it's changed within the Bible itself. So, you've got things in the Old Testament about women and about slavery and about life and about mixing religions in marriage and whatnot. And then you look in the New Testament and things have changed. If they've changed, then you know that particular command, that particular regulation isn't something that's timeless. They must be linked to the circumstances in which they were given. And the other test is the circumstance in which they're given actually part of that regulation? We might be living in a completely different circumstance, and so we do need to look at that too.
Yeah, sure. So what was the purpose of the law in the Bible then, David?
Well, God's got his purposes. God wants to bring us closer to him. God wants us to not fall apart and be a society that helps each other. Yeah. And so God gave laws that would prompt people in those directions. But of course, that isn't going to be the same in every society. You don't. If you want to encourage girls to be educated, for instance, in the Old Testament, you can give a certain number of prompts in that direction, but it's not going to get very far because you need the girls just to get on with having babies and looking after the household, and they really don't have time for anything else. Yeah. But by New Testament times, it's a completely different situation. There is more time, and so Paul and Jesus are encouraging women to be educated. And now, of course, there's a completely different situation. So we have to think about what is God's purpose? What's God pushing for all the time? Yeah. And work for that.
Yeah. Our God isn't a God of confusion at all. How have we got ourselves as Christians today into such a bit of a pickle with so many different subjects?
I think there are too many lawyers. or perhaps there are people who think in legalistic ways. They look in the Bible and they look for a rule and they want to follow that rule instead of thinking, what does God want? That's what I want.
One of the early chapters in the book, you talk about abortion, which I know was a subject that you had some first-hand experience in because you speak about it in the book that you was a medical student. Tell us a little bit about your research on this and what conclusion you came up with.
Yeah, in the New Testament times, they didn't have abortion like we do. That would have been really dangerous, opening up a woman or trying to get her to have to deliver the baby early. Yeah. People died that way. They did try it, but people died. So what they did usually was wait for the birth, and then they put the baby in front of the head of the family, which might be the baby's father or it might be the father-in-law, depending if he's still living in his house. And if he picks the baby up and gives it a name and says, "Welcome to the family, Susan," or whatever, that's fine. If he turns his back and walks away, that's it. That baby has to die. And it's sometimes they did actually kill them, but often they would just abandon them. They called it exposure. In the classical world, they would put them on a hillside and wait for the gods to help or not. But in practice, you find a rubbish dump around the back street somewhere, and you leave the baby there. Absolutely terrible.
One of the things that I really enjoyed when reading the book is how much detail and how much context, and there's so many wow moments where, you know, you reveal things that I had no idea about, and this was, you know, exposure was one of those things. Tell us a little bit about the conclusion you came up with about abortion, say, because I know even today, well, in actual fact, with all of the topics that you cover, there are Christians that will land in different places on pretty much every subject that you cover. So tell me about the conclusion you came up with abortion and you know, why it's important.
Yeah. You say I bring up all these interesting details. It's because I actually live in the first century. I'm a little bit. that's where my mind lives.
Yeah.
So I'm quite at home there.
You do a great job of taking us there, though, David. I mean, that's one of the great things about this book. You take the reader on a journey, and we feel like we're there with you. It's brilliant. I love that.
Well, one of the benefits of reading so much stuff that's outside the New Testament in the first century is you get a feel for the audience that the New Testament is written for.
Yeah.
And in Acts, you get this apostolic decision to send a letter around to all the churches, telling them to stop doing 4 things. And there's blood, and there's strangling, and there's, oh goodness, I can't remember what they are. Hey, so putting idolatry and sexual immorality.
Yeah.
4 things.
Yeah.
And people have been confused about what this strangling is. It's a really rare word, pniktos. And I decided, well, okay, let's look at every place in ancient Greek literature where this word pniktos is used. We've got this database called TLG, the Thesaurus Graecolinguae, which has all of Greek literature from the year dot to 1000 AD. And so you can search through everything that's been written. And I found only 10 places in the whole of Greek literature using this word. 5 of them were in menus. Menus, yeah. A meal had been served up, and there on the menu is pniktos, meat that was, well, whatever.
Yeah.
And people would discuss their meals after they've eaten them in the ancient world. You have whole books written on meals which people have eaten.
Yeah.
It's a crazy world. Anyway, so there I was trying to find out what this pniktos meat was, and they get a fetus, a baby, a baby pig or baby lamb or even baby octopus, and they snuff the life out of it. They smother it with their hand till it's to kill it, and then they cook it just very lightly, and it's very succulent. Absolutely disgusting to me to think of doing that, but that's what I did. And of course, that's what you did when you had a baby that you were going to get rid of. You don't leave it screaming on the rubbish dump. You cover its mouth until it stops crying and is dead, and you leave it there. And they snuffed out these babies. You don't there's not a regulation against strangling food. So you can't strangle a cow before you eat it.
Yeah, of course.
You can't even strangle a goat or a sheep, really. But it was just this word pniktos. You don't strangle. You don't snuff out life. You don't do that at all.
Yeah. But there are Christians under the. I mean, I've had conversations via our Facebook page before for Exposit The Word, where Christians will stand up for pro-choice, and they'll say that we shouldn't judge, and they'll quote Bible verses, and they'll also say about which obviously there are some circumstances where and I know it's a small percentage about incest or rape, and it will often go to there in the argument. What would you say to those Christians that are still fighting the case and using scripture to encourage abortion today?
I wish that there was more of an understanding of letting the child be born and letting it be either adopted, or, if you change your mind, helping that person to be able to support that child. That's what the church should be about. helping people who are pregnant, and I can see how bearing a child after a rape is absolutely terrible.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And personally, I'm not against the morning after pill. There's another book coming out with science questions, and there I go into the science of development and when life actually begins, and when it is okay. And the morning after pill, I see no problem with. But if you've decided to go on after that, then there's a life there, and so it's not your life.
Yeah.
We should be looking after that life.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Very helpful. So another one of the chapters that I found really interesting was should Christians use crude language? We live in an entertainment age today where, I'll be sitting down, not very regularly, but whenever we sit down and we'll watch a TV series, even one that's on at, it could be on 3:00 in the afternoon, and there'll be blaspheming. That just seems to be in every single TV show now. Crude words, end up in PG films now where they didn't years ago. Tell us a little bit about, the use of crude language and where we should be as Christians within the use of it.
Yeah, I remember when I went to teach a class about the resurrection, and I said about how Jesus Christ rose. And as soon as I said Jesus Christ, everyone sort of sat up as if, whoa, what's he doing swearing?
Yeah.
Because that's the only time they ever hear Jesus Christ as a swear word.
Yeah.
We do live in a crazy world now where blasphemy is just okay. And the crude language has always been with us. Blasphemy is something which is rather new. I mean, the New Testament does have crude language. There's things that we just can't translate into English properly because Paul wasn't always as polite as he might have been. And so some of the other terms that you find in the Bible, you just have to think. Well, I don't know if you realise I'm on the NIV committee, and so we're often looking at different ways in which things should be translated. And sometimes we think this is going to be read out in church.
Yeah.
And we've got to remember that. We've got to remember the blushes and the giggles when we're translating. But crude language in itself, the sort of the forceful language, that's not the bad thing. The really bad thing is the blasphemy, where you're taking God and saying, you are nothing, but I'm just going to use your name to say something really crude.
Yeah. In a world of text messaging today, I know that OMG has become extremely popular, especially with young people. Where do you stand on that? Is that still blasphemy, David?
It's a matter of whether you remember what it means. You have to recall that blimey is may God blind me.
Oh, wow, really? Wow, okay. Yeah.
And damn is, may God damn you to hell.
Yeah.
So these things, they become just part of our language, and we don't think about what they mean. And I guess if we're not thinking about what they mean, then but of course someone else who's receiving it might know what it means.
Yeah, sure.
You hear Christians say crikey, where of course that's Christ. And bloody isn't referring just to the red stuff that comes out of you. It's saying by the blood of Christ.
Wow.
Which that's what it used to be, and now it just sort of becomes shorter and shorter until you forget what it means. So whatever crude language you use, you're likely to be going back to some sort of blasphemy in the past. And personally, my language is BBC.
Yeah. What chapter did you find hardest to write, David, and why?
Oh goodness, let's see what have we got here. I think probably sex and singleness.
Yeah,
that's a tricky one.
Yeah.
And racism. Gluttony was a really interesting one. I had no idea how in the early church, if you ate until you were really full, that was gluttonous.
Yeah.
That would save us a lot of obesity, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Personally, I do like being full. I think the hardest chapter was the one that was the introduction and conclusions, which are trying to work out the method by which other people can take the Bible and say, okay, I'm going to look at the details here, and I'm going to look at how it works, and I'm going to see what God is telling me about what I can do in my life. Yeah. And I want to make it very simple so that people can do that for themselves. So I don't want them to pick up a book by an expert and say, okay, that's what the expert says. I want people to be able to read the Bible for themselves and say, okay, this is what God wants.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Giving them the tools. I love that. That's great. I mean, that may well lead into my next question, because I was going to say to you, what topic are you most excited for people to read?
I want them to read the Bible.
Yeah.
I want them to go to the Bible and say, hey, this really is God's message to me and to my society, and what's he saying? And not to be afraid of asking the questions, because there's going to be loads of places where you say, this really doesn't make sense to me at all. And that's okay. That's okay. All the important bits about Jesus dying for us and asking for forgiveness and Jesus coming back to save this planet going to hell, it's all that is clear.
Yeah.
And it's the bits we don't understand. We don't have to be worried about them. We don't have to be frightened, but tease at them and get at them and pray about them and see what God is saying about those things. Yeah. And so it's not that I want people to read my book. I want people to read the book, see how to read the Bible, and go off and read the Bible.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. Did your own opinions change on any matters whilst you were researching and writing this book?
Lying. My view of lying changed quite a bit, because I really hate lies. I don't know if I'm a bit of Asperger's on this. I tend to listen to what people say and believe them. And when it turns out to be a lie, it really undermines my thinking. And I personally don't lie, and I find it very difficult coping with people who do lie. But when I looked at that, I realised there are so many times when a lie is necessary. Herod had to lie about Jesus. The wise men had to lie to Herod about Jesus, and not tell him where he was and things. And so you sometimes you have to lie to hide someone from a deadly enemy and that. So I can see that lying is necessary, but I can't tolerate it myself. Yeah. But I realised that the Bible has a clear distinction, which I hadn't noticed before, between perjury lying, that's so giving an oath saying I'm going to tell the truth and then you don't, in a legal sense, and social lies. Yes, that dress looks lovely. And in Hebrew, there's absolutely clear distinction in the vocabulary that's used. So it's very easy to see which they're talking about. And what's said about that in the Old Testament is completely different for the two. One is absolutely wrong, and the other, well, sometimes you have to do it.
Writing a book like this is going to be almost impossible to have someone finish it and land in all the same places that you have on every single subject. In writing this, was there ever a part of you that stayed up at night thinking, goodness, I could be really wrong about this, and one of your conclusions?
I don't mind being completely wrong, because I'm not claiming to be completely right. Yeah. I'm saying, look, this is what the Bible says, and this is how I'm reasoning, and this is the conclusion I'm coming to. And if someone says, well, no, hang on, what about this verse, or what about this circumstance? Well, that's good. They're thinking. And that's what I want people to do with these chapters, to get to the end and not say, oh, right, that's the answer, but get to the end and say, oh, right, now that's given me some stuff to think about.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
I'm not too bothered about being wrong, but actually I don't think I am.
You mentioned before, I think you've already actually penned the next book in this series, haven't you? Is that all complete and ready to go?
Yep, the next one is about doctrine and how it was understood in the first century. Stripping away 2,000 years of church details which have been added into our doctrines, and seeing what Christian doctrine would have looked like to the very earliest Christians.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's going to be really good. So, and what about any other projects? Are you working on any more books, David?
There's another 4 after that. There's one on the Bible in the context of science. That's not beating up science with the Bible or beating up the Bible with science, but taking them both as streams of truth and seeing how the science can help us understand things, how the Bible can help us understand things, putting them together. Then I got one on the ancient literature and the Bible. That is looking at the sorts of literature that are around at the times of the Old Testament, at the times of the New Testament, and seeing how we can learn about the way in which the Bible is talking from the way in which they were writing things, how the poetry works, how history works, how letters work, and helping us to understand the Bible that way. And then there's one on lifestyle. There's different ways in which people lived, and how that can make us understand some of these stories that are in the Bible, which sometimes don't really make sense. What on earth was it that Sarah found so hilarious that she made her laugh out loud? It's little gems in their customs that help unravel these stories that we got in front of us. They're based on articles which I've brought out in Christianity magazine, but they tend to end up about twice as long in the book.
Yeah, excellent.
So they're sort of written, but there's still a lot of work to be done on them.
Just need
3 manuscripts have gone off to Lexham, and there's another 3 to be delivered.
Awesome. So when is the next one out then, David?
I don't know. That's up to Lexham. It's already out of my hands. They've got 2 manuscripts from me.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to reading that. Hopefully, we'll get you back on the show and we can talk about that when it gets released.
And you can see the books being written at BibleContexts.com. That's Bible Contexts with an S at the end of the context, because the Bible has so many contexts that it's speaking into. BibleContexts.com, and so you can pick up the chapters for free there. I put 2 chapters up every month, so that you can read them and comment on them and discuss and disagree. And then next month there's another 2 chapters there.
That's so good. Well, we'll put a link to that in the description below then, David. So thank you for that. Do you do any social media? Are you on Twitter or Instagram?
Well, I have an account on Twitter, and I have some private groups in Facebook, but I tend not to. I'm a very unsocial person.
Oh yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, we'll put the link into the website below. We'll also put a link into the where you can buy the book via Lexham in the link below as well. David, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Great talking to you, David.
Thank you so much. All the best, David.